Peace and welcome to the Atlantis School for Gifted Youngsters. Thanks for watching and subscribing to our channel. This model right here is a tool that I use in terms of assessing youth and my approach towards helping bring them to a state of homeostasis or balance. So it's a square. A square has four sides, it has four angles, and all of those angles are right angles. So in our approach, we have to always consider what is the most appropriate or right angle in order to reach this child with. So there's primarily three different ways in which we engage you. From a two perspective, a not perspective, a for perspective, and a with perspective. So when you look at the square, the reason why the word punitive is under two is because a lot of times you have adults who engage children based upon what they're going to do to them. It's a two dynamic in relationship to youth. So that has a high level of control. That's the area that kind of posture or perspective is in. That is a person that has the outlook in terms of youth that it's just all about me having control and setting limits and being disciplined. So as an adult, my relationship is to you. But also, when you look at that perspective, it being punitive, it has a very low level of support, encouragement, and nurturing. That's why it's in that top corner, because it has a high level of control and a very low level of support. So when you see children who have been subjected to a very punitive upbringing, because they have that low level of support and they have that high level of control or limits and discipline, once they get out of that type of scenario or situation, you oftentimes see them get buck wild, because their entire life has always been about them being controlled. So freedom to them is very, very important. And because they had that low level of support, they also gravitate towards groups that can offer that type of support, whether it's positive or negative, because they never really experienced that before. Now, when you look down at the bottom, you see the opposite, which is the not posture perspective towards youth, which is neglectful. So when you look at the not posture or perspective towards youth, it has a very low level of control, limits, and discipline. And it also has a very low level of support, encouragement, and nurturing. So that posture is, I don't really have a relationship to you like that, so I'm not doing anything to you or for you. So you also have children who grow up where that is the dynamic in terms of their lack of relationship to adults. There's no real control, no discipline, no limits being set, nor is there any encouragement or support. I've been around children who have been in environments like that, and when you go to the place where they live, it's not a house, it's not even a home. It's just four walls and a roof with people inside of it. And they kind of do their own thing. And that's very neglectful, which also creates the circumstances for a child to get caught up in various different situations and scenarios. All children desire and need some sense of control, discipline, and limits. But when you have a low level of that and it's not present at all, that also makes you susceptible to being in environments where there is going to be some sense of control, limits, and discipline set up on you. At the same time, when there's a low lack of encouragement and support, children may gravitate towards groups, whether they're negative or positive, that can offer that kind of support. So on that side as well, that makes them susceptible to being taken advantage of, because that's something that was low in terms of what they had available to them growing up. When you look down into the right corner, the other perspective and posture towards youth is the 4 posture and perspective, which is very permissive. But one thing you see with that posture is that it has a very low level of control, limits, and discipline. Low level of control and discipline. But it has a very high level of support. So these are the type of scenarios where you see adults that just constantly cuddle and give their children or youth whatever they want without setting no limits or no discipline or anything like that. They let them do whatever they want. Right? For example, I know a parent that has a teenage daughter, and when I say teenage, I'm talking about just reached her teenage years. And she allows her boyfriend to sleep over there in the bed. And her younger siblings is the ones that told me about it. Because her younger siblings, who are 10 and 11 years old, can hear their older 14-year-old sibling in their room having sex. Because the parent has a, I can see joy like, oh, hell no. Yo, because the parent is very permissive. They're just constantly doing things for that child. And sometimes a parent, I've had a preschool parent one time who was setting the same type of dynamics up for their child, who she would just do anything. This child was 5 years old and she's bringing him to class, carrying him like a little baby. And he's saying and acting wild, saying and doing whatever he wants with no limits or no discipline. And she's just constantly encouraging and supporting that behavior because she don't want to upset him. And one of the reasons why she was doing that is because at one point in her life, she didn't have her children because she was dealing with some substance abuse. So she kind of felt guilty because she didn't have her children in her life like that for some time. And she didn't want to set no type of limits and discipline because she felt as though if she asserted that level of control, she might run the risk of losing the relationship even more than what she didn't have to begin with. So she allows them to do whatever they want. So this was one of the children. He had an older sister who was probably about 3 years older, and she was much more sophisticated and utilized that type of dynamic to her advantage. She would consistently do stuff in order so that the parent would feel guilty and get her way even more, right? So that's a permissive perspective. The one in the right corner, which is a restorative or a perspective that deals more with a sense of reciprocity, it has a high level of control, limits and discipline, and it also has a high level of support, encouragement, and nurturing. That's the most optimal space to be in terms of having that level of equilibrium and stability working with our children, because it allows you to set reasonable limits and control and to be assertive, but also know when to not be as assertive and to support the growth and development of our children, and not be in some of the other different areas in terms of punitive, neglectful, or permissive, right? So again, this is just like a simple model or a box that I use when I'm assessing myself, dealing with my own children, and then also assessing myself when I'm engaging and working with youth. You know, am I providing the most restorative approach And I use the word restorative because you have a lot of our children who are coming from situations where you have dysfunction and trauma. And we also have to consider that, you know, there is some element of trauma-informed care that we're giving our children that's coming from spaces like that. You know, even if we're just providing them with a listening ear or support in this area or whatever, or encouragement, you know, it has to have a restorative element to it.